Emily Thompson walked into the high-end boutique, her heart weighed down by exhaustion, but her lips curved into a tired smile. She had been working here for months, each day feeling like an endless battle. Her manager, Olivia Collins, treated her less like an employee and more like a servant. No matter how hard Emily worked or how many sales she made, Olivia always found a way to take credit and leave Emily with nothing. Most days, instead of helping customers, Emily was sent on errands, picking up dry cleaning, fetching coffee, even cleaning the stockroom while the other staff attended to the boutique's wealthy clientele. "You should be grateful," Olivia would sneer. "You don't even belong here." The senior staff wasn't any better. They snatched her clients, laughed at her simple clothes, and piled on the most menial tasks. But Emily never complained. She needed the job. One afternoon, as Emily carefully folded an array of luxurious dresses, the glass door swung open, and in walked an old man. His clothes were tattered, his shoes worn with holes, and his hair a wild mess. The other employees exchanged disgusted glances, their eyes narrowing as he approached. "Sir, you can't be here," one of them sneered. "This is a luxury store." The old man smiled, his yellowed teeth flashing. "I just want to look around," he said softly. Olivia strutted over, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. She eyed him with disdain, then snorted. "We don't serve people like you here," she said. "This is a boutique for high-class clients, not beggars." The other staff members snickered in agreement, their laughter echoing through the store. Emily's heart ached as she watched the man, feeling an overwhelming surge of empathy. She knew what it felt like to be judged based on appearance, to be treated as less than. Without hesitation, she walked over and gently touched his arm. "Would you like some water, sir?" she asked, her voice kind. His eyes lit up, and he nodded, grateful for the simple kindness. Emily ignored the judgmental stares and whispers of her colleagues as she brought him a cold glass of water, offering him a seat and a warm smile. "Take your time, sir," she said. "Let me know if you need any help." The old man looked at her with deep appreciation, his rough hand gently touching hers. "Good things happen to good people," he whispered, his voice soft yet filled with sincerity. Emily didn't know why, but his words lingered in her heart long after he left. The next afternoon, as Emily meticulously arranged a row of designer coats, the door opened once again, and the old man, Arthur Harrison, returned. This time, his demeanor was different, more confident, as though something had shifted within him. His once rumpled clothes were replaced by a sharp suit, tailored perfectly to his frame. The faded shoes had been replaced with polished leather ones, and his messy hair was combed neatly. As he entered, the air in the boutique seemed to change. The staff, who had once mocked him, now watched him with widened eyes, unsure of what to make of his transformation. Olivia, her lips still curled in disdain, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Arthur walked straight up to Emily, his eyes kind but determined. "You were kind to me yesterday," he said, his voice low but clear. "And I have a favor to ask." Emily was taken aback, not expecting anything. Certainly not this. "Of course, sir," she replied, her curiosity piqued. Arthur smiled, and for the first time she saw a twinkle of mischief in his eyes. "I want to buy 10 of your finest outfits," he said simply. "Suits, shirts, shoes, the best you have." Emily's heart skipped a beat. 10 luxury outfits? She had never made a sale of that magnitude before. She hesitated, then quickly regained her composure. "Certainly, sir. I'll get started right away." As she began selecting the most exquisite pieces, her hands shook slightly from the excitement. The other staff stood at a distance, whispering among themselves. "She's so naive," one muttered, eyeing Emily's every move. "This old man couldn't afford any of this," another sneered. Olivia stood with her arms folded, watching with a smirk, clearly enjoying the scene. But Emily was too focused on the task at hand. She meticulously picked out the most elegant suits, carefully adjusted collars, picked out silk ties that complemented each jacket, and found shoes that would make Arthur look every bit the gentleman. After nearly an hour, Emily laid out the final selections, her heart pounding in anticipation. "These should fit you perfectly," she said with a warm smile. Arthur clapped his hands in approval, his face lighting up with delight. "I'll take them all," he declared. Emily's jaw dropped. "All of them?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Arthur said with a smile. "How much?" $225,000, sir." Emily said, her voice trembling with excitement. The boutique fell silent. Olivia's eyes narrowed, her lips forming a tight smirk. But it was the other staff who gasped, exchanging confused looks. Arthur reached into his pocket and began patting it down. His face shifted from confident to slightly embarrassed. "Ah, I seem to have left my wallet at home," he said with a chuckle. Emily's smile faltered. The boutique erupted in laughter. "Are you kidding me?" One of the senior staff shrieked. "You honestly thought this old man could afford all that?" Olivia stepped closer, her perfume wafting in the air, and sneered. "You really are clueless, aren't you?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You thought this beggar could actually buy those clothes." But Emily refused to back down. She turned to Arthur, her voice soft but firm. "It's okay, sir," she said gently. "Don't worry about it." The laughter died down, but the sting of mockery still lingered. Arthur looked at her with gratitude, his eyes filled with warmth. "Thank you, my dear," he whispered. "You are a rare soul." Without thinking, Emily reached into her purse and pulled out the last of her savings. "At least take this for a taxi home, sir," she said, pressing the money into his hand. Arthur's hands trembled as he accepted it, his voice full of emotion. "You are a kind woman," he said softly. "Thank you." Before she could say anything else, Olivia's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. "I told you not to bring people like this into the boutique, Emily," she said, her eyes flashing with contempt. "You're ruining our image. Lux Group has standards, and you are bringing it down." Emily's heart sank, but she refused to let Olivia's cruelty affect her. She turned to Arthur, offering him a final smile. "Take care, sir," she said, her voice steady. Arthur nodded, giving her a soft, appreciative smile before he left the store. As Emily watched him disappear through the door, she didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. The following day, Emily was still reeling from the encounter with Arthur Harrison when a black luxury car pulled up in front of the boutique. She barely had time to process the sight when the door opened, and out stepped Arthur once again. This time, there was no shabby suit or unkempt hair. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, a silk tie tucked neatly under his collar, and polished leather shoes that gleamed under the boutique lights. The transformation was so sudden, it almost took her breath away. Arthur walked in with the same humble smile, but this time there was something different about him, a quiet confidence that made the room fall still. The staff, who had once ridiculed him, watched in stunned silence, unsure of what to say. Olivia, her ever-present smug expression fading, slowly walked over to him, trying to mask the surprise on her face. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone dripping with forced politeness. Arthur didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on Emily, who was still frozen behind the counter. "I've come to make good on my promise," he said, his voice warm yet firm. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a thick envelope. "I'd like to purchase the items you selected for me yesterday." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Sir, are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Of course," Arthur said with a small smile. "I believe you've earned it." Emily was speechless, staring at the envelope full of money in his hands. She had never dreamed of such an extravagant sale, nothing even close. Her mind raced, but she quickly composed herself and took the envelope. As she turned to the other staff members, their eyes widened in disbelief, clearly still processing what was happening. They had seen Arthur, with his ragged clothes and disheveled appearance, walk in just the day before as a beggar, and now he stood before them in a fine suit, ready to spend more money than they had ever seen. Olivia's face contorted with frustration. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed tightly together as she fought to keep her composure. "Well," she said through gritted teeth, "I suppose we can assist you with your purchases, sir." Without another word, Emily carefully guided Arthur to the fitting room, where she began selecting the most luxurious pieces. As she folded the fabrics, she could barely contain her excitement. She had been working at the boutique for so long, enduring the constant humiliation and belittlement, but now, in the midst of this surreal turn of events, she had an opportunity to prove herself. With every suit, every shirt, every pair of shoes she carefully placed in the fitting room for him to try on, Emily's heart raced. The other staff watched from a distance, their earlier mockery now replaced with confusion and awe. When Arthur finally emerged in his new outfits, he looked every bit the part of a wealthy, high-class gentleman. The fine fabric of the suits hugged his frame perfectly, and the silk ties added an air of sophistication that hadn't been there just hours ago. Emily beamed, her hands trembling as she took in the sight of him. "You look incredible, sir," she said, her voice full of admiration. Arthur smiled broadly. "I feel incredible," he said, "and I'd like to buy everything." The total was enough to make Emily's head spin. $225,000, she said, almost in disbelief. Arthur nodded without hesitation, reaching for his wallet. But when he fumbled through his pockets, his expression changed. He gave a small, apologetic chuckle. "I seem to have forgotten my wallet at home again," he said, his voice light, though there was a hint of discomfort. The boutique fell silent. The staff stared, eyes wide, as Arthur awkwardly patted his pockets. The laughter that followed was cruel and quick. "Oh, come on," one of the senior staff members scoffed. "You expect us to believe this?" Olivia was barely able to hide her amusement, crossing her arms and leaning back against the counter. "So, what now? You thought you could fool us again, old man?" she sneered. But Emily, despite the humiliation brewing around her, stepped forward. Without hesitation, she reached into her purse and pulled out the last of her savings. "It's okay, sir," she said quietly. "Don't worry about it. Take this for your ride home." Arthur's eyes widened in shock, and for a brief moment, Emily saw the depth of emotion in his gaze. He took the money from her, his hands shaking slightly as he did. "You are truly a rare soul," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you, my dear. I will never forget your kindness." Before anyone could speak, Arthur turned and left, his presence lingering in the room long after he was gone. As the door closed behind him, the air in the boutique seemed to shift. The staff, who had once mocked him, now stood in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the full scope of what had just happened. And Emily, her heart still racing, knew that her life was about to change forever. The next morning, Emily arrived at work early, the weight of yesterday still hanging heavy in her chest. She had done the right thing by helping Arthur, but she couldn't shake the sting of Olivia's cruel words or the ridicule from her colleagues. As she folded clothes in the back, lost in her thoughts, the glass door opened with a soft chime. Emily barely looked up, assuming it was just another customer, but then she heard a familiar, warm voice. "Good morning, Miss Thompson." She turned around quickly, her eyes widening in disbelief. There, standing in the doorway, was Arthur Harrison. This time, not in a worn suit, but in a tailored, sharp black jacket, exuding an air of authority. His once tattered shoes were replaced by polished leather, and his hair was combed back neatly. He looked like someone who had just walked off the pages of a magazine, a far cry from the man who had walked in the day before. "Sir?" Emily stammered, unable to hide her surprise. Arthur smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "I believe we have some unfinished business," he said, holding out a crisp envelope. The boutique staff, who had been whispering and laughing just the day before, fell silent as Arthur walked past them, heading straight toward Emily. He handed her the envelope, and she took it carefully, unsure of what to expect. "Yesterday, you treated me with kindness when no one else did," Arthur continued, his voice steady. "That means more than you'll ever know." Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, unsure of how to respond. She had never imagined that someone like him, who had seemed so ordinary yesterday, could change so drastically in a single day. Without another word, Arthur sat down across from her, his presence calm and commanding. "I've decided to make a purchase," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I want everything you selected for me." Emily blinked, stunned. "You want all of it?" Arthur nodded, a warm smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, every piece. The finest suits, the best shoes, everything." Her heart skipped a beat. This was the biggest sale she had ever made, far more than she could ever have dreamed of. But as she led him to the fitting room, her mind raced, and the reality of the situation hit her. She had no idea who this man truly was, but what she did know was that her kindness had been returned tenfold. And for the first time in a long while, she felt seen. As she helped Arthur try on each piece, her hands shook with excitement. She picked out the most elegant suits, adjusted collars, and paired silk ties with meticulous care. The entire time, Arthur smiled, his gratitude apparent in every glance he gave her. The other staff, who had watched from a distance, now exchanged confused looks. The mocking whispers from the day before had ceased, replaced with silence and awe. Arthur Harrison, now revealed to be a wealthy man of power, was in Emily's corner. When Arthur finally emerged in his final selection, looking every bit the distinguished gentleman, Emily couldn't help but smile. "You look perfect," she said, her voice filled with admiration. He returned the smile, his eyes shining with appreciation. "I'll take them all," he said, his voice steady with certainty. The total was more money than Emily had ever dreamed of earning in one day. $225,000, sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur reached into his pocket, but his expression shifted to one of mild embarrassment as he patted it down. "Ah," he said with a small chuckle, "I seem to have forgotten my wallet at home." Emily's heart sank as the room erupted in laughter. The staff, who had been so quick to judge him the day before, now stood in silent disbelief. Olivia's lips curled into a tight smirk as she leaned in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "How convenient," she sneered. "You thought you could fool us again, old man?" But Emily wouldn't allow the mockery to sway her. She looked at Arthur with compassion and reached into her own purse, pulling out the last of her savings. "It's okay, sir," she said, her voice soft. "Please, take this for the taxi ride home." Arthur's eyes widened, his hands trembling as he accepted the money. "You truly are a rare soul," he whispered, gratitude filling his voice. "Thank you, Emily." Without another word, he turned and left, but not before casting one final glance back at her, his eyes filled with appreciation. As the door closed behind him, the boutique seemed to come to a standstill. The laughter had died, leaving only an uncomfortable silence in its wake. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, and although the humiliation lingered, she couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of pride. As she stood there, holding the envelope in her hands, she realized something. Her life was about to change, and the simple act of kindness she had shown would lead her down a path she never could have predicted. The following day, as Emily was tidying up the boutique, her heart still buzzing from the whirlwind events of yesterday, the door swung open once more. She barely had time to look up before a sleek black limousine glided to a stop outside. Emily froze as the door opened, and out stepped Arthur Harrison, once again transformed, his suit now an impeccable tailored masterpiece, his posture radiating confidence. He looked nothing like the man who had walked in the day before. But there was something about his gaze that remained unchanged, kind, genuine, and direct. As the staff whispered and watched from the sidelines, Emily stood motionless, her heart pounding. Arthur approached her without hesitation, his presence commanding, yet his voice remained warm as he spoke. "Good morning, Emily. I hope you don't mind, but I've come to settle our little agreement from yesterday." "Sir?" she replied, her voice almost trembling with a mixture of curiosity and awe. "What do you mean?" Arthur smiled, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "I've decided to make a purchase. All of the suits you selected for me." Emily's stomach fluttered with excitement. She had been dreaming of this moment, but never could she have imagined it happening so quickly. She had carefully selected each piece with precision, and now Arthur stood before her, ready to pay for it all. As he handed her an envelope thick with money, Emily's mind raced. This could be the sale that changed everything. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice barely a whisper, unsure of how to react. Arthur chuckled softly. "It's the least I can do," he said, his eyes sincere. "But I have another request. I'd like to invite you to lunch. There's something I believe you should see." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never expected such a personal invitation from someone so powerful. "Lunch?" she repeated, her voice almost in disbelief. "Yes, Emily. I would be honored if you'd join me," Arthur said, his tone steady, yet inviting. "I think you deserve to see a different side of things, a side you don't get to witness here." The offer was unexpected, but something about Arthur's demeanor, his quiet strength, made her feel comfortable. Without a second thought, she agreed, and within minutes, she found herself stepping out of the boutique, the soft hum of the city streets filling the air. The luxury car waiting outside was a stark contrast to the life Emily had always known. As they drove through the city, the towering skyscrapers slowly gave way to quieter, more tranquil surroundings. The car turned down a long, tree-lined driveway, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. Before her stood an estate, grand and pristine, its marble columns and lush gardens a symbol of wealth and power that Emily had only ever seen in movies. Arthur led her through the gates, where a team of staff members greeted him with warm smiles, their movements elegant and practiced. Inside, the mansion was beyond anything Emily could have imagined. The floors gleamed with polished marble, and the walls were adorned with priceless works of art. Chandeliers hung from the ceilings, casting soft light over everything. Arthur led her to a beautiful dining room where a table was set for two, the fine china gleaming against the soft glow of the candles. "I wanted you to see this, Emily," Arthur said as he gestured to the opulence around them. "This is the world I come from, a world you've never had the chance to experience." Emily stood there, overwhelmed by the sheer beauty of it all. But as she looked at Arthur, she realized something. Despite the wealth, despite the grandeur, it was his kindness that stood out the most. She wasn't here because of the luxury. She was here because he had chosen to see her. Not as an employee, not as someone beneath him, but as someone worthy of his time. They sat down to a simple but exquisite meal, and as they ate, they talked. Arthur shared stories of his life, his family, his business, the lessons he had learned along the way. Emily listened, captivated by his wisdom and the genuine warmth in his voice. There were no pretenses, no barriers between them. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt truly seen. As lunch came to an end, Arthur stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the estate with a contemplative expression. He turned back to her, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I don't believe in coincidences, Emily. You showed me kindness when the world was ready to judge me, and for that, I want to repay you. I have a feeling you'll be a very important part of my life moving forward." Emily's heart raced as his words sank in. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the brink of something life-changing. As she stood up to leave, Arthur's gaze lingered on her, a quiet promise hanging in the air between them. "You'll never have to struggle again, Emily," he said softly, his voice sincere. "Not if I can help it." And in that moment, Emily knew that her life, the one she had lived for so long in the shadows, was about to change forever. Days passed, and as Emily adjusted to her new life, something in the air began to shift. The whispers that had once been nothing more than behind-the-back gossip now grew louder, seeping into every corner of Lux Group's headquarters. Emily, who had barely settled into her role as Benjamin Harrison's personal assistant, suddenly found herself the subject of constant scrutiny. It wasn't just the staff who were talking. It was the executives, the high-ranking managers, everyone. The office buzzed with rumors that Emily had somehow seduced Benjamin, used her charm to climb the ranks, and manipulated her way into his life. Sophia Parker, the senior manager who had never hidden her disdain for Emily, seized the opportunity. With a smile as sharp as a knife, she spread the toxic whispers, stoking the fire of envy and jealousy that burned among the employees. "Have you heard? She's only here because she's sleeping with the boss," Sophia would say in hushed tones, her voice dripping with malice. "She thinks she can just waltz in and take everything." Emily tried to ignore the whispers, tried to focus on her work, but every day felt like a battle. The looks from her colleagues, the snide comments, the cold shoulders. It was like walking through a minefield. Each time she entered the break room, the conversations would stop and eyes would turn toward her, filled with judgment and suspicion. Emily's heart would race, her breath catching in her throat, but she held her head high, refusing to let them see how much it hurt. One afternoon, as Emily was organizing papers in her office, she heard the sharp click of high heels approaching. She looked up, her stomach sinking, when she saw Sophia standing in the doorway, a smug grin plastered across her face. Well, if it isn't the new favorite," Sophia sneered. "Must be nice, huh? Sleeping your way to the top." Before Emily could respond, Sophia's laughter rang out, cold and mocking. "You think Benjamin really cares about you? He's just bored, darling. He's never been one for commitment. You'll be out of here the moment he gets tired of you." Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let Sophia see how deeply her words cut. Instead, she forced a calm smile and looked Sophia square in the eye. "I'm here because I'm good at my job," Emily said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I don't need anyone's approval." Sophia's grin faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Sure, if you say so. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving Emily to swallow the lump in her throat. The days that followed were a blur of tension and whispered cruelty. But as much as the rumors and taunts stung, Emily refused to let them define her. She had worked too hard, struggled too much, to let the jealousy of others ruin everything she had worked for. And then came the breaking point. It was during a company-wide meeting, one that Benjamin had called to discuss upcoming projects, when the rumors finally reached his ears. The moment he walked into the room, the atmosphere shifted. The employees, who had been whispering behind her back for weeks, suddenly fell silent, their eyes darting toward Emily. She could feel the weight of their gazes, their judgment. But before she could react, Benjamin's voice cut through the tension, his words as cold and commanding as ice. Enough, he said sharply, his gaze sweeping over the room. I've been hearing a lot of nonsense lately, and I've had enough. Emily Thompson is here because she earned her place. She's not here for any other reason. The room went still. Emily could feel the blood drain from her face, her heart racing. Benjamin's voice, steady and unwavering, continued. If I hear one more word about her that isn't work-related, I will take action. This isn't the kind of environment I want at Lux Group. Do I make myself clear? A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. But the looks of disdain and jealousy didn't disappear. They had been given their warning, but Emily knew the hardest part was yet to come. As the meeting continued, Emily sat quietly at the back, her heart still pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her, but now, instead of judgment, there was fear. Fear that Benjamin would do exactly what he promised. She had no idea how much longer she could hold her ground. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to back down. For the first time, she felt like she was truly standing up for herself, fighting not just for her job, but for her dignity. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to let anyone tear her down. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Emily had just returned to her desk after a long morning of navigating the office whispers, her heart still heavy from the meeting. She had tried to focus on the work at hand, but the words of her colleagues, the sneering looks, and the constant mutterings gnawed at her. Just as she sat down, a sharp knock echoed through her office door, pulling her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see Benjamin standing there, his jaw set, his eyes steely and focused. Without waiting for her to speak, he stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The air felt even thicker now, charged with something she couldn't quite place. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Emily could feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging in the room like a storm cloud. "Is everything okay, Emily?" Benjamin asked, his voice low but firm, his gaze unwavering. The question was simple, but there was something in his tone that made her heart beat faster. He wasn't just asking about the work, he was asking about her. Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly as she clasped them together on the desk. "I'm fine," she said, though she could hear the strain in her voice. She wasn't fine, not at all. The constant pressure, the accusations, the rumors, everything was wearing her down. But she wasn't about to break. Not now, not in front of him. Benjamin studied her for a moment longer, then his expression softened. "I don't believe you," he said quietly, the words carrying a weight of truth that made Emily's heart flutter. "I know what's going on here. I've heard the whispers, the gossip, the way they've treated you." She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "It's just part of the job," she murmured, trying to brush it off. "I can handle it." "Don't," he snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. "You shouldn't have to handle it. No one should." His frustration was palpable, and it took Emily by surprise. This isn't how it's supposed to be. You deserve respect, not the backstabbing and lies that people are spreading about you. The raw sincerity in his voice hit her harder than she expected. She swallowed hard, trying to find the right words, but none came. Benjamin's eyes softened as he walked toward her, his presence suddenly filling the small space. "I don't care about the rumors, Emily. I don't care about what they say," he continued, his voice steady. "You've earned your place here, not because of who you know, but because of who you are. And I'm not going to let anyone treat you like this." Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This wasn't just about the office politics anymore. This was about someone finally seeing her for who she truly was. And in a world that had only ever made her feel invisible, that was a feeling she couldn't describe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Benjamin didn't say anything at first. He simply reached out, gently resting a hand on hers. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes: comfort, understanding, and a promise she hadn't realized she needed. His touch was warm, grounding, and for the first time since she had stepped into this world, Emily felt like she belonged. "I'm going to handle this," he said, his voice filled with determination. "No one is going to make you feel like you don't deserve to be here. I'll make sure of it." As he turned to leave, Emily sat there, her heart still racing. For the first time, she felt like someone was truly in her corner, someone who saw her worth beyond the whispers and the lies. The storm that had been swirling in her chest began to calm, and as Benjamin left her office, his promise hanging in the air, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment her life truly began to change. The days following Benjamin's declaration had been quieter, but the tension in the air had only thickened. Emily could feel it: whispers, sidelong glances, and the simmering animosity among her colleagues. Everything about the office felt off. Despite Benjamin's assurances, nothing had truly changed. The staff still whispered behind her back, their comments growing more malicious as they tried to tear her down. But Emily kept her head down, focusing on her work, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. It wasn't until the morning that everything came to a head. Emily was sitting at her desk, working through a series of meetings and emails, when the door to her office swung open. She barely looked up, assuming it was another colleague, but then she heard the voice she dreaded. Sophia Parker. "Isn't it a little early for you to be playing secretary?" Sophia sneered, stepping into the room with her signature smug smile, her heels clicking loudly on the polished floor. Emily didn't respond at first, her hands trembling slightly as she typed, her gaze remaining fixed on the screen. But Sophia wasn't one to back down so easily. She walked closer, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I thought you were going to stay humble, keep your head low. But now look at you, living in Benjamin's mansion, wearing those expensive outfits. Most don't think I haven't noticed. You really think you're special now, don't you?" Emily's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to breathe, keeping her focus. "I'm here to work," she said, her voice calm but firm, "and I suggest you do the same." Sophia's eyes narrowed as she leaned in, her voice suddenly cold and malicious. "You don't belong here, Emily. You never did. And no matter how much you try to cling to that man's attention, you're still just a nobody. A gold digger pretending to be someone you're not. You'll never have what I have." Emily's chest tightened with the familiar sting of humiliation, but she didn't let it show. She stood slowly, her eyes meeting Sophia's. The confrontation had been building for days, and she wasn't about to back down now. "If anyone's pretending, it's you," Emily said, her voice steady with a bite. "You don't have the power you think you do, and no matter what you say, it won't change who I am." Sophia's face flushed with anger, her jaw tightening. She opened her mouth to retaliate, but just then, Benjamin walked into the room, his gaze immediately landing on the tension between the two women. His presence filled the space, commanding attention. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm but sharp, the kind of voice that brooked no argument. Sophia straightened up, her posture instantly shifting as she plastered on a fake smile. "Of course not, Benjamin," she said, her tone dripping with feigned sweetness. "I was just checking on Emily, making sure everything's going well with her new position." Benjamin's eyes flickered from Sophia to Emily, his expression unreadable. He could see right through Sophia's facade, and he knew exactly what was going on. "I think Emily can handle her job without your help," he said coldly, his voice laced with authority. Sophia's smile faltered for a moment, her eyes flashing with frustration. "Of course, Benjamin. I'll leave you two to it," she said, her voice tight. With a final glance at Emily, she turned and walked out of the office, her heels echoing in the silence. As soon as the door closed, Emily let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked at Benjamin, her heart pounding. He had seen it all. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but full of gratitude. Benjamin gave her a small smile, stepping closer. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. This isn't how things should be. You deserve better than that. Emily nodded, her throat tight with emotion. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about the respect she had fought so hard to earn. For the first time since she had started, she didn't feel alone in this fight. Benjamin had her back, and that meant more to her than words could express. You're right, she said, her voice stronger now. I'm not going to let them tear me down. I've worked too hard to get here. Benjamin's eyes softened. And you'll keep working hard, but don't let them change who you are. You're better than they'll ever understand. With those words, Emily knew, without a doubt, that she had made the right choice in standing her ground. She wasn't just fighting for her job, she was fighting for her dignity, her worth. And this time, no one, not Sophia, not anyone, could take that from her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos and uncertainty. Emily had hoped the worst of the office drama was behind her, but she was about to find out just how far some people would go to destroy her. It all started one morning when she was at her desk, catching up on emails. The atmosphere in the office was unusually tense, as if a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. She barely had time to react when the door to her office slammed open, and in walked Sophia, her face flushed with fury. You've gone too far, Emily, Sophia spat, her eyes burning with jealousy. You think you can just waltz into this company, into Benjamin's life, and take everything? You think you deserve all of this? Emily felt her heart race, but she kept her composure, lifting her chin and meeting Sophia's gaze. I'm not trying to take anything from anyone, Sophia. I'm just doing my job. Sophia laughed, a hollow sound that filled the room. Oh, really? Is that what you call it? Because I see a woman using her body to get what she wants. You've played the game well, but don't think I didn't notice. I'm not stupid. The words hit Emily harder than she expected, the sting of betrayal flashing through her. But before she could respond, the door opened again, and to her shock, a security guard stepped in, holding something in his hand, a small velvet bag. He looked uncomfortable, as if he didn't want to be the bearer of bad news. This was found in your office, Miss Thompson, he said, his voice low. A diamond necklace. It's registered under the Benson family collection. Emily's blood ran cold. She glanced at Sophia, who was watching her with a triumphant smirk. The guard placed the bag on Emily's desk, and the necklace inside gleamed under the office lights, its value far beyond what Emily could ever afford. Sophia's voice dripped with venom as she stepped forward, her eyes alight with malicious delight. Funny, isn't it? I thought you said you didn't care about money, but here you are, trying to steal from the Bensons. You really think you can play the innocent little secretary while you pocket their treasures? Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the necklace, her heart pounding in her chest. I didn't take this, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know how it got there. Sophia wasn't finished. Of course you didn't. You never do you? You always find a way to twist the story in your favor. She turned to the security guard, her voice sweet and sarcastic. You should check her things. I'm sure you'll find more. She's been stealing from the family, and she's been clever enough to cover her tracks. Emily's mind raced, a million thoughts flashing through her head. She had done nothing wrong, yet here she was, being accused of something unforgivable. The pressure, the humiliation, it felt suffocating. I didn't steal anything, Emily said firmly, her voice gaining strength. You're making this up. But Sophia only smiled, the satisfaction in her eyes like a predator's gaze. We'll see about that, won't we? Within moments, Benjamin walked into the room, his usual confident stride stopping as he saw the tension between the two women. His eyes flicked from Sophia to Emily, then back to Sophia, his expression unreadable. What's going on here? He asked, his voice sharp. Sophia wasted no time. Benjamin, you need to see this. We found the necklace in Emily's office. She's been stealing from your family, and we can't let this slide. This is unacceptable. Benjamin's gaze darkened, and Emily could see the anger building behind his eyes. But instead of reacting immediately, he stepped forward, his focus solely on Emily. Is this true, Emily? He asked, his voice quiet but filled with authority. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of his gaze almost too much to bear. I swear I didn't take it, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know how it got there. I would never steal from you. Benjamin looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers as if trying to find the truth. Then, without a word, he turned to the security guard. "I want this investigated thoroughly," he said, his voice low but commanding. "And I expect no assumptions to be made. We'll find out who is responsible." Sophia's smirk faltered as Benjamin's words hit her. "But," I said, "no assumptions," Benjamin repeated, his voice growing colder. "Get out, both of you. I'll handle this." Sophia hesitated for a moment, her gaze flickering between Emily and Benjamin, but she had no choice but to leave. As she stepped out of the room, she threw one last victorious look at Emily before the door closed behind her. Benjamin turned back to Emily, his eyes softening with a mixture of concern and anger. "Emily, I know you. I know you didn't do this. I'll clear your name. You have my word." The weight on Emily's chest lifted slightly, but the damage had been done. The whispers, the accusations. It was all too much. She could feel the weight of the entire office's judgment on her shoulders, but Benjamin's words, though few, gave her a shred of hope. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As Benjamin walked out of the room, Emily felt the storm inside her calm, but only just. She had been tested, pushed to the edge, but she refused to let Sophia or anyone else win. With every ounce of strength she had left, Emily vowed to clear her name. She would fight back, not just for herself, but for everything she had worked for. The next morning, Emily barely slept a wink, the weight of the accusation still pressing down on her chest. As she stepped into the office, the tension was unbearable. Her colleagues were whispering behind their hands, their glances sharp and full of judgment. The necklace was still on her mind, and the thought of being falsely accused of something so terrible made her stomach churn. But there was no time to dwell on it, no time to allow the fear to settle in. She had to be strong, if only for herself. As the day wore on, the hum of the office seemed louder than ever. Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cold stares of her coworkers making it nearly impossible to focus. Every whisper felt like it was aimed directly at her, and every glance felt like another accusation. She could feel her confidence slipping, her heart sinking with every passing minute. But just as she thought she couldn't take any more, the door to her office opened, and Benjamin stepped in, his expression stern but softened with a hint of concern. "Emily," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "Come with me. Now." Emily's heart skipped a beat, her nerves on edge. She had no idea what was going to happen next, but she followed him without a word. As they made their way through the maze of hallways, Emily couldn't help but notice the silence around them. It was as if everyone in the building was holding their breath, waiting to see what Benjamin would do. When they reached his office, Benjamin opened the door and gestured for Emily to step inside. She entered, her mind racing, unsure of what was about to unfold. The door shut softly behind her, and for a moment, there was only the sound of her rapid breathing and the quiet rustling of papers on his desk. "Sit down," Benjamin said, his tone more relaxed now, though there was still a fire in his eyes. Emily obeyed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her stomach twisting with nerves. "I've seen the security footage," he began, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know exactly who planted the necklace in your office, Emily." Emily's breath caught in her throat, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over her. She opened her mouth to speak, but Benjamin raised a hand to stop her. "I've also spoken to the staff," he continued. "The whispers, the accusations, it all stops now. I've made it clear that I will not tolerate this kind of behavior. Not in my company, not from anyone." For the first time in what felt like days, Emily let out a shaky breath. The weight on her shoulders began to lift, but the tension in her body remained. She wasn't out of the woods yet, but the storm was finally starting to pass. Benjamin's eyes softened as he looked at her, his voice dropping to a gentler tone. "I've already taken care of everything. Sophia Parker has been fired, and the rumors about you have been completely debunked. You're not just my employee anymore, Emily. You're someone I trust, someone I respect." The words felt like a balm to her soul. All the pain, the fear, the humiliation, it suddenly seemed so distant, replaced by something else, something stronger, gratitude, hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Benjamin smiled, though it was a rare, genuine one. "You deserve it, and from this moment forward, you'll have nothing but respect from me and from everyone else here." As Emily stood to leave, her heart lighter than it had been in days, Benjamin's voice stopped her. There's one more thing. She turned back to face him, her brow furrowing in confusion. You're going to be promoted, he said, his tone no longer businesslike, but filled with a kind of warmth she wasn't used to hearing from him. You'll be working directly with me. I know what you're capable of. It's time you show everyone else. A rush of emotions flooded Emily at his words. Shock, gratitude, amazement. She had been ready to give up, ready to leave it all behind. But now, Benjamin was offering her something she had never dared to dream of, true recognition. Thank you, she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. I won't let you down. I know you won't, he replied with a nod. You never have. As Emily stepped out of his office, the weight of the world seemed to fall away. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting to thrive. And this time she wasn't alone. With Benjamin by her side, she felt invincible. As the days passed, the tension in the office seemed to dissipate, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking beneath the surface. The whispers had stopped, the rumors quelled, but the war was far from over. Sophia's defeat had only been the first battle. The real challenge now was proving herself, not just to her colleagues, but to Benjamin as well. The pressure of being the chosen one, the one who had survived it all, weighed heavily on her. But she wasn't about to let it break her. It was late one afternoon when the next storm hit. Emily had just wrapped up a long meeting with the team, her mind spinning with details and deadlines. She was finishing up some reports in her office when the door suddenly flew open. Sophia stepped in, her expression dark and filled with contempt. Emily felt a chill sweep through the room as she looked up, meeting the fiery glare of her former adversary. What do you want, Sophia? Emily asked, her voice firm, steady, but laced with the anger that had been building up inside her for days. Sophia didn't answer right away. She stood there for a moment, staring at Emily with a look that could burn through steel. Then, with a cold, bitter smile, she spoke. You think you've won, don't you? She sneered, stepping closer. You've managed to crawl your way to the top, all because Benjamin decided to play the hero. But you're nothing but a pawn, Emily. You think you're in control, but you're not. You'll never truly belong here. You'll always be the outsider, the poor, simple girl who doesn't know what she's doing. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She had heard it all before, from everyone. It was always the same. Mockery, judgment, attempts to break her down. But this time, she wouldn't let it get to her. This time, she would stand her ground. Is that what you think? Emily said, her voice low, but full of conviction. You think I'm just some outsider, some girl who doesn't belong? I'm here because I earned my place. I didn't get here because of Benjamin or anyone else. I got here because I worked hard, and I will continue to do so. Sophia's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a cruel smile. You really don't get it, do you? You think Benjamin cares about you? He doesn't. He's only using you to get under my skin, to prove some point. You're a tool, nothing more. Emily felt a surge of heat rise within her, but instead of letting the anger boil over, she took a deep breath and stood taller. She wasn't going to let Sophia's words break her. Not now. Not ever. You're wrong, Emily said, her voice steady, unwavering. Benjamin doesn't need to use me to get to you, and he doesn't see me as a tool. He sees me as someone who's earned his trust, and that's something you'll never understand. Sophia stepped back, her face flushed with rage. For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a low, seething laugh, she turned and walked toward the door. You're delusional, she spat, before pausing and looking over her shoulder one last time. Enjoy it while it lasts. You won't be here forever. Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. As the door slammed shut behind Sophia, she felt a surge of relief, mixed with something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Power. She had stood up for herself. And it felt incredible. But as the adrenaline faded and she sat back down at her desk, she realized that this was just the beginning. Sophia might have lost the battle, but she hadn't lost the war, and Emily was ready, ready to fight, ready to prove, not just to Sophia, but to everyone else, that she was here to stay. As Emily sat in her office, the weight of the last few days seemed to press on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The accusations from Sophia were still fresh in her mind. The sting of being branded a thief had not fully subsided, and the pressure of maintaining her place at Lux Group felt like an endless storm she was struggling to weather. But she was determined. She wouldn't let them break her. She had worked too hard, fought too many battles to let someone like Sophia tear it all down with lies. The sound of her phone buzzing on the desk snapped her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, her breath catching in her throat when she saw the name, Benjamin Harrison. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this a call to check in? Or was something else happening? She took a deep breath and answered, trying to steady her voice. Emily. Benjamin's voice was calm, but with an edge of something serious. I need to see you in my office, now. Her pulse quickened. She stood up, pushing away the anxious thoughts that tried to surface. She had no idea what this was about, but she knew she couldn't back down. Not now. As she made her way down the hallway, her footsteps seemed to echo, each one louder than the last, as if the entire building was watching her. She had never felt so exposed. When she reached his office, she paused for a moment, taking a steadying breath before she knocked softly. Come in. She entered, her stomach a tight knot, and Benjamin's gaze immediately met hers. His eyes were dark, unreadable, and his jaw was set in that firm, determined way that always made her heart race. He motioned for her to sit, and she did, nervously tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I've been going over everything, he began, his tone measured. The accusations, the necklace, the rumors, and I'm done with it. This stops now. Emily felt a sudden rush of relief flood through her. She hadn't even realized how much tension had built up in her until it began to ease, but she held herself together. She didn't speak. She knew he wasn't finished. I've reviewed the security footage, spoke to the staff, and gathered all the facts, Benjamin continued, his eyes never leaving hers. And there's no question in my mind that you had nothing to do with it. The necklace was planted in your office, and I know exactly who is responsible. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know whether to feel elated or terrified by the thought of the person being exposed. She tried to keep her emotions in check, her heart hammering in her chest. I've taken care of it, Benjamin said, his voice unwavering. Sophia Parker has been fired. She's gone. And the rumors, they end today. A wave of disbelief washed over Emily. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Sophia? Fired? Gone? You're free to do your job now, without any of this hanging over you, he said, his voice firm, but with a softness she wasn't used to hearing from him. I don't want anyone making you feel less than. You earned your place here, and I'm not letting anyone take that from you. The weight on Emily's shoulders felt lighter than it had in weeks, but she still couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief. Her throat tightened with emotion, and she struggled to find the words. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. Benjamin's expression softened. You don't need to thank me, he said, standing and walking around the desk. You've already proven yourself. Now it's time for the rest of the company to see that too. He paused for a moment, as if considering his next words carefully. I've already made sure that you'll be getting the recognition you deserve. No more whispers, no more games. It's your time now. For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. The relief, the disbelief, the gratitude, all tangled up inside her. All she had ever wanted was to be seen, to be respected for the work she did. And now, in front of her, was the man who was going to make that happen. I won't let you down, she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. I'll prove to everyone that I belong here. Benjamin gave her a small smile, his eyes softening. I know you will. As she left his office, the weight of everything she had been carrying, the stress, the doubt, the fear, felt like it had finally been lifted. This wasn't just about keeping her job anymore. This was about her standing tall, knowing her worth, and having the strength to fight for it. And for the first time, she felt like she could truly take on whatever came next. Nothing could stand in her way now. She was ready to show the world and herself that she was exactly where she was meant to be.